My aunt stood up in the middle of the legal office, pointed her diamond-ringed finger right at my face, and screamed, "She's a thief. She doesn't deserve a single penny of Mom's money." Every eye in the room turned to glare at me with pure hatred. My cousin smirked, convinced they were about to divide up a multi-million-dollar estate while leaving me broke on the street. I didn't argue. I just sat there in silence. That's when Grandma's attorney slowly closed his folder, looked at my greedy family, and plugged a small black flash drive into the television on the wall. "Actually," the lawyer said, his voice deadly calm, "we aren't reading the paperwork today. Before she passed, your mother recorded a message specifically for this exact moment. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Olivia. I'm 33 years old, and for 8 years, I worked as a dedicated nurse, treating strangers with deep compassion while my own relatives treated me like an outsider. But nothing prepared me for the suffocating tension inside that mahogany-paneled conference room on the top floor of a downtown law firm. Across the long glass table sat my Aunt Evelyn, wearing a tailored cream blazer that screamed wealth she couldn't afford, and her 28-year-old daughter Victoria, who was busy checking her reflection like this was a social hour rather than the reading of my grandmother's last will and testament. Between the two of them, they hadn't spent more than 4 total hours with Grandma during the painful final year of her life. I, on the other hand, had stepped away from my career to move into Grandma's house full-time. I managed her heavy medication schedule, washed her linens, cooked her light meals, and held her frail hand through endless, tearful nights. I didn't do it for a single cent. I did it because she was the only person who had ever truly loved me. Yet, as we waited for the attorney to begin, Evelyn glared at me with pure, unadulterated contempt. The funeral flowers hadn't even withered, but real grief hadn't touched either of them. They were opportunists waiting to carve up a multi-million-dollar estate, and they were determined to make sure I left with nothing. As Grandma's health began to decline over the past year, the atmosphere around her quiet suburban home changed dramatically. While I was waking up at 3 in the morning to adjust her oxygen tanks, track her vitals, and soothe her pain, Aunt Evelyn and Victoria were conspicuously absent. Their idea of checking on Grandma consisted of brief, superficial holiday visits, half-hour pit stops where they'd sip tea, drop off store-bought flowers, and casually ask about the value of the family real estate or inspect the vintage jewelry locked away in her bedroom. They saw Grandma not as a matriarch deserving of dignity, but as a ticking clock attached to a massive payout. When they realized just how much time I was spending alone with her, desperation set in. They couldn't stand the thought of an outcast niece interfering with their windfall. So, 3 weeks before Grandma passed, Evelyn launched a vicious, calculated attack. She began calling family members, spreading a toxic lie that I was taking advantage of a confused old woman. She claimed that priceless antique heirlooms, a sapphire ring that had been in the family for 3 generations and a gold pocket watch, had suddenly gone missing from Grandma's safe. Evelyn publicly accused me of stealing them, telling everyone I was using my position as a caregiver to quietly strip the house of its valuables before Grandma even breathed her last. The rest of the family swallowed the lie whole. By the time the funeral rolled around, my own relatives treated me like a criminal. I received cold stares, whispers behind my back, and outright hostility. They turned my grief into a nightmare, convinced they were about to expose a thief and claim everything for themselves. The silence inside the mahogany conference room felt heavy enough to choke on. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, stale coffee, and unbridled greed. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city moved on, oblivious to the high-stakes execution about to take place at this table. Aunt Evelyn cleared her throat loudly, breaking the quiet with calculated hostility. She slid a crisp, double-sided sheet of paper across the dark wood until it landed directly in front of my hands. "Save us all the embarrassing legal drama, Olivia," Victoria said, leaning forward with her arms crossed, her eyes cold and condescending. "It's a voluntary waiver of estate claims. Sign it, walk away cleanly, and we might decide not to press formal charges for those missing heirlooms. Consider it a mercy." I looked down at the paper. It was a pre-drafted legal release, designed to strip me of any right to challenge the will or claim a single dime for the care I had provided. They truly believed they had backed me into a corner. They thought I was terrified, broken, and desperate to avoid a public scandal. Instead of pleading or shedding a tear, I gently pushed the paperback toward them. I kept my face entirely blank, concealing the secret request Grandma had whispered to me 3 days before she drew her last breath. "I'll wait for the lawyer," I said quietly. Evelyn snorted in disgust, completely unaware that her perfect trap was about to spring on her instead. The door to the conference room swung open, and Mr. Harrison, a sharp attorney with silver hair and a stern expression, stepped inside. He didn't offer warm pleasantries or polite smiles. He simply sat at the head of the table, placed a slim leather briefcase on the wood, and looked over his spectacles at Aunt Evelyn and Victoria. "We are here for the estate of Eleanor Vance," Mr. Harrison announced, his voice steady and solemn. "We know why we're here, Arthur," Evelyn interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "Let's make this quick. Read the document so my daughter and I can begin liquidating the real estate. As for Olivia, well, she knows she doesn't belong in this room." Mr. Harrison didn't flinch. Instead, he slowly closed the paper file sitting before him. "Actually, Mrs. Evelyn, we will not be reading the paper will first today. 6 weeks before her passing, your mother summoned me to her residence to execute a specific, legally binding codicil. At her strict direction, I was instructed to play a video recording for the family, specifically for this exact moment." Victoria rolled her eyes, but Evelyn's triumphant smile faltered just a fraction. Mr. Harrison pulled a small black flash drive from his pocket, inserted it into the side of a large flat-screen television mounted on the wall, and pressed play. The screen flickered to life, revealing my grandmother sitting in her favorite armchair, looking frail but entirely alert. Her eyes were sharp, focused, and carrying an unmistakable intensity. Held firmly in her lap was a small black leather notebook. "If you are watching this," Grandma's recorded voice echoed clearly through the silent room, "it means I am gone, and Evelyn has likely already accused Olivia of stealing." Evelyn gasped, freezing in her chair. "I am fully aware that my sapphire ring and gold pocket watch disappeared 3 weeks ago," Grandma continued on screen, her voice calm and unwavering. "What Evelyn and Victoria do not realize is that Olivia installed high-definition security cameras throughout my home at my request to monitor my health. Those cameras recorded everything, including the night Evelyn unlocked my safe while I was asleep and slipped those heirlooms into her purse." Aunt Evelyn's face drained of every ounce of color. Victoria gasped, turning to her mother in absolute shock. But the video didn't stop. Grandma shifted on screen, opening the black ledger in her lap. "You thought my mind was fading." Grandma's voice boomed softly through the speakers. "You thought you could strip my legacy bit by bit while I was too weak to fight back. But I was watching. Everything was recorded, time-stamped, and backed up onto a secure server managed by Mr. Harrison." Evelyn slammed her hands on the table, standing up frantically. "Turn that off. This is illegal." She wasn't in her right mind. "Sit down, Evelyn," Mr. Harrison warned, his tone ice-cold. "Your mother underwent a full psychiatric evaluation the very day this video was recorded. She was declared completely competent." On the monitor, Grandma delivered the ultimate blow. "As for my estate, the house, the land, and the primary accounts, you will not be dividing a single dime. 8 months ago, I transferred all real property into an irrevocable trust. The sole trustee and beneficiary of that trust is Olivia." Victoria let out a sharp, hysterical shriek. "That's millions. You can't leave everything to a nurse." Furthermore, Grandma continued on the recording, her eyes staring straight into the camera. "Mr. Harrison has documented the unauthorized wire transfer Evelyn executed 4 months ago, moving $80,000 from my secondary account into her own company. That constitutes grand larceny and elder financial abuse. I have left explicit instructions. Unless every stolen heirloom and every single dollar is returned to the trust within 48 hours, Mr. Harrison will hand all video footage and bank records directly to the district attorney." The TV screen went black, leaving the conference room in a stunned, suffocating silence. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. Then, the room exploded into absolute chaos. Aunt Evelyn collapsed back into her chair, clutching her chest, her face slick with sweat. "This is a setup," she shrieked, her voice cracking with terror. "Arthur, you colluded with her. You coerced my mother." "I strongly advise you to watch your tone, Evelyn," Mr. Harrison said, calmly folding his hands over the file. "Every document is rock solid. Every piece of video evidence is authenticated. If you attempt to litigate this, the evidence will immediately become public record during discovery, and the police will be involved before the week is over." Victoria turned on her mother, her eyes wide with frantic rage. "You told me you had this under control," she yelled, her voice echoing off the glass walls. "You told me the money was ours. What did you do with the $80,000? Evelyn couldn't even answer. She stared at me, her lip trembling, the arrogant predator instantly reduced to a desperate, exposed fraud. Victoria scrambled across the table, grabbing at my sleeve with trembling hands. "Olivia, please. We're family. You know Grandma wasn't fair to us. Talk to the lawyer. Tell him not to press charges. We can work this out." I slowly stood up, smoothed down my jacket, and pulled my arm out of her grip. I looked down at both of them, the 2 people who had made my life a living hell while I cared for a dying woman. "You have 48 hours to return the money and the heirlooms," I said, my voice dead calm. "Not 1 minute more." 6 months have passed since that day in the law firm, and my life looks completely different. Aunt Evelyn and Victoria didn't dare risk a prison sentence. Within 36 hours, the stolen sapphire ring and gold pocket watch were returned through their legal counsel, along with a cashier's check fully reimbursing the $80,000. To cover their massive debts and avoid prosecution, Evelyn was forced to put her lavish home on the market, while Victoria had to sell her luxury car just to pay off their mountain of legal fees. They haven't spoken a word to me since, and for the first time in my life, I am perfectly okay with that. Using the trust fund Grandma left behind, I honor her memory by founding the Eleanor Vance Center, a nonprofit facility that provides high-quality, free end-of-life care and support for low-income elderly patients who have no one else to lean on. Every time I walk through those doors, I feel my grandmother's warmth and strength guiding me. She taught me that family isn't defined by bloodlines or empty promises, but by loyalty, sacrifice, and doing what is right when no one else is watching. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have given them 48 hours? Or